the COVID-19 pandemic, it is an honor once again to take part in person at this General Assembly. I would like to start this address by congratulating His Excellency Mr. Saba Korosi on his election as President of the 77th General Assembly of the UN. Thank you, Mr. President, for the motto you have chosen, solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science, which we shall assume as our own, and which is aligned with the principles applied in Andorra, both from a domestic and an international political perspective. You may depend on Andorra's loyal support for the 77th session, and we wish you every success. Please allow me also to express my acknowledgement of the presidency of Mr. Abdullah Shahid and of the innovative and action-oriented initiatives he has encouraged over the course of a year, in which there has been no shortage of challenges. These have once again emphasized the essential role of the United Nations and the multilateralism it embodies. A year ago, when the COVID-19 pandemic was still very much determining the social and economic policies of many countries, the Secretary-General of the UN, Mr. Antonio Guterres, warned us that the global and multidimensional crisis generated by COVID-19 once again underlined global fragilities and structural inequalities. Global governance neither knew how to respond nor provided the appropriate means for vaccines to reach all countries, which left millions of people in a situation of extreme vulnerability. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Secretary-General on his excellent work in what remains a very delicate context, which unfortunately has many points in common with the reasons for which the United Nations was founded. Indeed, today the world continues to experience a succession and accumulation of different crises, accentuated by the devastating impact on the planet of an economy that is nearing the end of its cycle and that has based its productivity on excessive use of raw materials. The planet is exhausted, and the symptoms are all too evident. The climate emergency is being felt in the form of heat waves, wildfires, water shortages, and extreme phenomena that lead to catastrophes. The planet's triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution affects everyone. We now have the last opportunity effectively and forcefully to address the climate crisis, which is the most global and important challenge we are facing. Unfortunately, climate change is not the only transnational challenge that besets us. Just as we were starting to discern an improvement in the circumstances created by the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, a clear violation of the UN Charter, has exposed cracks in the international order and corroborated the loss of respect for the common values that sustain our peaceful coexistence and that are the essence or the raison d'être of this assembly. This conflict is having a devastating impact on the civilian population and is causing one of the worst refugee crises on the European continent since the Second World War, which is why Andorra once again has shown its solidarity by welcoming numerous Ukrainian families to whom it has given the chance to live and work in our country. This is also what we did in 2018 during the humanitarian crisis caused by the war in Syria. As I explained in the political orientation debate held last week in the Conseil Général, our parliament, although our voice in the world does not have the backing of a large population, armies, natural resources, or a strategic geographical location, it is sustained by the fortitude of principles and values that inspire our model of society. The impact of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, moreover, is not limited solely to our region. The threat of a food crisis due to a shortage of distribution of agricultural resources on other continents has required negotiations to prevent it. The energy crisis and rising prices are also generating economic difficulties beyond Europe, which need to be rectified. The situation is not hopeful, yet we should not allow it to bring an end to real politics. politics that makes what is necessary possible. We cannot allow unilateralism to prevail over multilateralism. This is how we understand it in Andorra, because a world without international rules or consensus would be a world governed by the law of the strongest. Our adherence to multilateralism is based on the conviction that tackling crises, challenges, and common threats requires a strong multilateral system, based on the universal values that inspired this organization and has required negotiations to prevent it. One may wonder, the energy crisis and rising prices of just over 80,000 inhabitants beyond Europe, territory half the size of New York City, do for a planet the situation is not hopeful, of over 8 billion. Yet we should not allow it to bring an end to real politics. Well, belief in our ability to set an example in our role to face global and common challenges. We cannot allow unilateralism to prevail over multilateralism. 29 years ago, this is how we understand it, with the approval of our Constitution, because a world without international rules or consensus would be a world governed by the law of the strongest. Our adherence to multilateralism is based on the conviction and its capabilities as an essential way of engagement and of working requires to identify challenges, come up with solutions, propose consensus, on the universal values that inspire this cooperation and keep lines of dialogue and action open. One may wonder, the energy crisis and rising prices we are now for 80,000 inhabitants, we can listen to everyone's territory half the size of New York City, do for a planet the situation is not this conviction means our country is and wishes to take belief in our ability to set an example in our role to face global and as we understand, we cannot allow unilateralism to prevail over multilateralism. 29 years ago, this is how we understand synergies, because a world without international rules or consensus would be a world governed by the law of the strongest. 2023 will give our adherence to multilateralism is based on the conviction and its capabilities as an essential way of engagement and of working to identify challenges and to reiterate our firm based on the universal values that inspire this organization. This anniversary also coincides with the 30th anniversary. One may wonder, the energy crisis and rising prices we are now for 80,000 inhabitants. We can listen to everyone's territory half the size of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, do for a planet. Throughout our situation is not this conviction means our country is and wishes to real belief in our ability to set an example in our role to face global as we understand, we cannot allow unilateralism to prevail over multilateralism. 29 years ago, this is how we understand synergy because a world without international rules or consensus would be of no issue as every year. In fact, 2023 will be our adherence to multilateralism is based on this celebrate and its capabilities as an essential way of engagement and of working. We were one of the first parties to the UN to reiterate our firm based on the universal values and national inspire this organization. This anniversary also coincides with the 30th anniversary. One may wonder, the energy of what countries we are now for 80,000 inhabitants. We can listen to everyone's territory half the size. We have pioneered in introducing a green tax and established a carbon price of €30 per tonne, which will lead us towards more sustainable mobility. This has practical and clearly beneficial effects for our citizens, as the Green Fund has enabled us to finance more and better energy efficiency programs and to become one of the world's first countries to offer free public transport, a milestone reached just a few months ago with indisputable success. Another law recently passed model in which most waste becomes a byproduct that is reintroduced into the production chain. Special emphasis is placed on combating the waste of resources and specifically of food. This is because we carefully monitor the FAO's reports on the basic issue of the right to food. the second Sustainable Development Goal. We took an active part at the 2021 Food Systems Summit, which I had the chance to highlight where I had the chance to highlight our fight against food waste and move towards sustainable food systems, which alongside San Marino, we have had the honor to make a priority policy. To mark the International Year of Sustainable Mountain Development, and since we are mentioning the FAO, I would like to mention the Mountain Partnership and its members, which raise awareness and offer insight, tools, and action for the development of mountain regions. Andorra has the highest capital city in Europe at an altitude of over 1,000 meters and an average altitude of around 2,000 meters. Mountain regions are of vital importance in natural systems, with their water cycles, influence on the climate, natural resources, biodiversity, and, meanwhile, they are highly vulnerable environments. In Andorra, for years, we have therefore been committed to caring for our natural heritage and making environmental protection one of our priorities. Mr. President, most countries have reappraised their actions or have observed how some processes of change which were half-heartedly introduced before the COVID-19 pandemic now need to be accelerated, while others require strengthening. The 2030 Agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, and over and above that, our common agenda proposed by the Secretary-General are powerful instruments that provide collective and holistic solutions, establish a deadline by which the goals must be achieved in order to build a better world in which human rights, a pillar of the United Nations, are the cornerstone for all of our actions. Andorra, which is firmly committed to the 2030 Agenda, presented the second voluntary national review last July. The report features a detailed analysis of the 17 SDGs and describes the policies being implemented to guarantee Andorra's sustainable, resilient, and inclusive recovery through the Horizon 23 Action Plan, the government plan that, following the outbreak of the pandemic, we formulated for this legislative term and which ends next year. Globally, COVID-19 has had a negative impact on the progress and achievement of the 17 SDGs. In some cases, we have even strayed from the targets. SDG 4, which calls for quality education and the priority objectives of which include the completion of free primary and secondary education for all girls and boys by 2030, is unfortunately far from a reality in many parts of the planet. The education of almost 90% of students around the world was interrupted at the end of April 2020, which was detrimental to over 1.5 billion children of school age. Many have not set foot in a classroom since then. The collateral impacts of the pandemic have therefore been particularly intense in the field of education and have highlighted the need to give fresh impetus to schooling. I therefore wish to highlight the Secretary-General's role in making education one of the core values of the United Nations system. A good example of this is the Transforming Education Summit, which was held in New York on September 19th. There is certainly no better tool for overcoming discrimination and prejudice than giving all children access to schooling, lifelong education, and quality education. Our country is fully committed to education as an essential tool for achieving a fairer, more responsible society based on ethical values, critical vision, and cooperative and supportive attitudes. Andorra's educational structure is one of the country's finest assets, as 3 plural and diverse public education systems, the Andorran, French, and Spanish, coexist, thus allowing us to ensure higher levels of tolerance, freedom, and democracy in the education of our children and young people. Specifically, multilingualism is one of the characteristic differentiating elements of the Andorran education system. We therefore wish to give our support and commitment to action promoted by the United Nations on multilingualism as a tool for dialogue, communication, exchange, and in short, as a vehicle for peace. We share the Secretary-General's view of the need for solidarity with the young generations so that they may be involved in decision-making. All Andorran institutions, therefore, work with young people so that they can take an active part in political life, and they are endowed with the skills they need to manage their futures. As political leaders, we are responsible for creating opportunities for future generations, and this is one of the goals that we work hard to achieve, so that our country will be able to offer opportunities for progress to new, increasingly well-trained generations, and they need not envision a future a long way from home. In our country, we believe that the creation of these new opportunities for the future is an inevitable step in completing the process of economic diversification that we started in 2012, and that because of the pandemic, we have wished to intensify by prioritizing key strategic sectors of sustainability and of innovation and research. The culmination is linked to the strengthening of our relations within the European Union through an association agreement that we have been negotiating since 2015, which has allowed us progressive, structured participation in the European internal market. It will therefore be possible to promote the internationalization of our companies and encourage mobility among our young people, and thus also contribute more to global prosperity. Mr. President, I now wish to mention another global challenge that we have considered and that relates to SDG 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Observation everywhere of persistent gender-based violence, a growing number of sexual assaults, murders of women, increasing job insecurity and wage gap shows that inequality still leads to vulnerability and excludes half of humanity. Feminism is one of the great challenges of the present moment, and it is absolutely essential for us to invest all our efforts in developing active, determined measures to build a new reality in which the equality of women and men is not only a right, but also a fact, whereby the collective imaginary cannot conceive of or accept discrimination against women. Last spring, the Conseil Général, our Parliament, approved the law for the effective application of the right to equal treatment and opportunities and non-discrimination between men and women. It is a pioneering law that provides essential tools for breaking down the invisible barrier that still prevents full equality. Some of the aspects regulated by this law, such as coeducation as a guiding principle for the entire education system, the requirement to draw up annual records of gender-related data, a determined commitment to eliminate the wage gap, and the coordination of equality plans in companies are the first of their kind. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, a year ago, in the report Our Common Agenda, Antonio Guterres delivered a very clear message. The United Nations' ability to fulfill the objectives established by its founders depends entirely on the collective political will of all its members and commitment to the pillars of the United Nations. This message has been understood, and Andorra fully supports the roadmap, which urges us to intensify action to strengthen and coordinate the global health architecture, to address the climate emergency, to renew solidarity among peoples, to provide space for youth, to encourage a new social contract on human rights and an approach to global commons. In assuming our responsibility, we must now work to achieve all this, and now, I dare to say, we have a historic opportunity to do so. We come from a very small country in which years ago we pledged to do things right, and in which everyone can express themselves freely, with an over 600-year-old parliament, depository of the people's sovereignty, and in which for over 7 centuries we have fortunately known only peace. You may therefore depend on our help, based on the values that have shaped us over history, to defend globally a fairer, more equitable world with a more efficient and sustainable economy, and see how our inaction led to catastrophic and irreversible damage to our planet and to humanity. No individual effort will be enough, but it will be necessary, as the struggle facing us and in which we are now immersed requires everyone to contribute. Andorra is willing to take part and to act with determination to be part of the solution. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Head of Government of the Principality of Andorra for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The General Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Pravin Kumar Jugnauth, Prime Minister, Minister for Defence, Home Affairs and External Communications, and Minister for Rodrigues, Outer Islands and Territorial Integrity of the Republic of Mauritius. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Pravin Kumar Jugnauth, Prime Minister, Minister for Defence, Home Affairs and External Communications, Minister for Rodrigues, Outer Islands and Territorial Integrity of the Republic of Mauritius. I invite him to address the Assembly.
The President of the General Assembly, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, let me congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election as President of the 77th session of the General Assembly. I wish to assure you of the full cooperation of my delegation in the fulfillment of your important duties. Mr. President, we are at a watershed moment in human history, when mankind is facing interlocking challenges which threaten peace, increase the level of poverty, and are likely to considerably delay the achievements of the SDGs. At this particular session, your proposed theme, Solutions through Solidarity, Sustainability and Science, can provide us with some transformative solutions to address them. Multilateralism continues to be under threat, yet there is no other body or entity more representative and likely to strengthen global cooperation than the United Nations. After the last 3 years of reeling from the pandemic, we were hoping that the availability of vaccines against our economy and that we would return to normalcy. Instead, the situation has worsened due to the conflict in Europe, which is having far and wide ramifications around the world. Conflicts and political instability have led to more crises, and the human tragedy of war has worsened. The profound economic impact is slowing growth and exacerbating the cost of living crisis. There is uncertainty as to when and how the conflict will end. But what is clear is that the massive influx of funds needed for recovery and reconstruction will necessarily draw from the much-needed assistance to countries seeking to recover from COVID. Millions of people will continue to suffer worldwide, and millions more will be left behind. While we are still confronting an uneven recovery of the global economy, the pandemic recovery gap between countries is widening, creating economic and social reverberations around the globe and injecting more uncertainty into global markets. The rising cost of commodities and energy, and in some cases their scarcity, will further weaken our economies and delay the achievement of the SDGs. Small island developing states like Mauritius, which are highly vulnerable, will be particularly affected. We make an urgent appeal to all players and the international community as a whole to work towards a cessation of hostilities and seek to resolve differences through peaceful means. Mr. President, this is the time when we should be seriously thinking of saving our planet, slowing down the effects of climate change, preventing a worldwide recession, and most importantly, preventing a nuclear catastrophe. Mr. President, we are witnessing more and more extreme weather events, higher than ever temperatures, droughts, fires, and floods are causing unprecedented challenges across the globe and a heavy toll on human life and material damage. I take this opportunity to express my government's sympathies and solidarity to the populations affected throughout the world, especially in Pakistan. COP27 gives us another chance to globally agree and commit to yet unprecedented measures to keep the temperature rise below the 1.5 degrees target. And refrain from any action that is tantamount to ecocide. Access to climate finance is essential to address these existential threats. Mauritius is keen to implement its nationally determined contributions, which is estimated to cost around $6.5 billion. Despite the huge costs to our economy, Mauritius has pledged to finance 35% of the projects. We appeal to the international community to support us for the remaining part. The financing needs for development projects in SIDS, like Mauritius, should be demand-driven and based on the prevailing economic conditions, especially in the light of the budgeting stress created by the pandemic. We must also address the inequities, and in this respect, the United Nations development systems, together with our development partners, should use a unified compass and a refined and more comprehensive vulnerability index, which accurately captures SIDS vulnerabilities to prioritize allocation of funds and increase the funding of development activities. Ocean-based economies are being deeply affected. Restoring the health of our oceans is crucial to preserve our biodiversity, community livelihoods, and climate resilience. Negotiations for a binding global treaty to end plastic pollution and the consensus reached on banning harmful fisheries are important steps in the right direction to turn the tides and make our oceans healthy for our sustainable development. Mauritius is committed to protecting the creation of an MPA around the Chagos Archipelago. We invite states, NGOs, and other stakeholders to support this initiative and assist in this creation, management, and enforcement of this marine protected area, which will be among the largest in the world. Mr. President, the world is getting increasingly connected digitally, and cyberspace is invading almost all areas of modern life. However, while it is providing new opportunities, it is also creating new challenges. The pandemic has brought to light the role of ICT as a crucial enabler of economic and social development, but we need to be cautious of the misuse and abuse of this technology as well. Mauritius' socio-economic vision, multicultural and societal values take into account and encourage the pursuit of a secure and safe digital world for all as we strive to undermine disinformation with accurate information. We strongly value the respect and promotion of human rights, both online and offline. We are equally keen to protect human values and promote tolerance and avoid hate speech. In this respect, we support the efforts of the international community to elaborate a comprehensive international convention on countering the use of information and communications technology for criminal purposes. Mr. President, implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in its totality is in the benefit of all for today's and future generations. Mauritius strongly believes that we must address the concerns of our youth for the future. Even though we are constrained by our insularity and limited means, we are striving to increase opportunities for our youth. Providing social protection and promoting social justice remain a key priority for our government. Despite very difficult economic challenges, we are maintaining our social welfare state, inter alia, by providing free health coverage, free education, and basic pension to the elderly. The economic empowerment of women is at the heart of various policies that we have adopted in Mauritius. Our government program is paving the way for society where gender equality is adhered to, ensuring fairness and equity among all, as well as the human and social development of women. And in this respect, Mauritius has made significant progress towards achieving gender equality. Mr. President, we reaffirm our full solidarity with the Palestinian people and strongly condemn the senseless acts of violence against its vulnerable population. Mr. President, the recent development on the world scene is again pointing to the need for us to improve our ability to respond to crises, be them man-made or natural. In this regard, we believe that the UN system, particularly the Security Council, needs the necessary reforms to make it more representative of the world today and thereby render it more effective. In that regard, we again reiterate the importance of expanding the Security Council with members of the African continent based on the Eswatini Consensus and the Seattle Declaration, as well as members from SIDS, amongst others. Mr. President, the fundamental pillars of the United Nations, such as development, human rights, and international peace and security, are grounded in the respect and promotion of international law. This essential bond between states enables the rule of law and global good governance to flourish, and without which there would be chaos. When the United Nations and the institutions which we have created for upholding international law are not respected, democratic governance and our universal values are undermined. International law cannot be applied selectively. It is universal, indivisible, and essential to promote multilateralism and international cooperation and strengthen faith in a fair and equitable global order. Mr. President, the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of 25 February 2019, UN General Assembly Resolution 73/295, and the judgment of the Special Chamber of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea of 28 January 2021 have confirmed with crystal clarity that international law recognizes the Chagos Archipelago to be and to have always been an integral part of the territory of Mauritius. Yet, despite UNGA resolution, which required the colonial administration to withdraw within 6 months of the date of its adoption, that part of our